James worked toward $50,000 for years. He watched the balance climb from $11,000 to $23,000 to $38,000, skipping things, saying no to things, building the number slowly and deliberately. The moment it finally crossed $50,000, he felt something close to triumph for about 4 seconds. Then a quieter, less triumphant question arrived. Okay, but now what? James closed the banking app and told himself he would figure it out the following weekend. The following weekend became the following month. The following month became most of a year. The $50,000 sat in the same checking-adjacent savings account, earning a fraction of a percent, while inflation quietly reduced what it could actually buy. This video is the framework James eventually used, and should have used immediately, for what to actually do once a meaningful sum of savings has accumulated. The window between saving the money and putting it to productive use is shorter than most people assume, and the cost of hesitation is real, even when it feels like caution. Picture two people, both 30, both crossing $50,000 in savings at the same moment. The first feels overwhelmed by the decision, too many options, too much risk of choosing wrong, and leaves the money exactly where it is, planning to address it seriously once things feel clearer. The second feels equally overwhelmed, but follows a specific sequence and has the entire sum productively deployed within 3 weeks. This video will return to both of them. The gap between their outcomes, starting from an identical position, is one of the more clarifying illustrations available in personal finance, and the uncomfortable truth is that most people watching are currently closer to the first person than they would like to admit. There is a well-documented psychological phenomenon called loss aversion. The discomfort of losing money is experienced roughly twice as intensely as the pleasure of gaining the same amount. When someone is sitting on $50,000, the prospect of any portion of it declining in value, even temporarily, even as a part of a sound long-term strategy, feels disproportionately threatening. This is not a character flaw. It is how human psychology evolved to function, optimized for avoiding ancient threats rather than managing a brokerage account. This is precisely why inaction feels like the responsible choice, even when it is mathematically the most expensive one. Inflation has averaged approximately 3% annually over the past decade. A standard savings account paying a fraction of a percent does not protect against this. It merely delays the recognition of the loss. $50,000 sitting at near zero interest for 10 years still displays $50,000 on the statement, but its actual purchasing power has eroded to roughly $37,000 in today's terms. Nothing was spent, nothing was lost in any dramatic sense. The money was simply left exposed to a slow, silent erosion that produces no notification and demands no immediate reaction, which is exactly what makes it so easy to ignore. Step 1. Build the emergency fund properly. The first move is establishing a true emergency fund. 3 to 6 months of essential living expenses, held somewhere fully liquid and accessible without penalty. The mistake most people make is not failing to build this fund, it is parking it somewhere earning almost nothing. As of early 2026, quality high-yield savings accounts pay between 4 and 4.25% annually, fully insured and accessible within minutes of opening an account online. On a $15,000 emergency fund, that difference between a standard bank account and a high-yield account is the difference between earning roughly $600 annually and earning barely more than $1. James's emergency fund had been sitting in the same bank account he had used since college. Moving it took 15 minutes and immediately began producing a meaningful return on money that was always going to sit untouched anyway. There is no reason this step should ever be skipped or delayed. It carries zero additional risk and produces immediate, measurable benefit. Step 2. Capture every dollar of employer matching. If an employer offers any form of retirement plan matching and current contributions are not capturing the full match, this is the single highest priority financial action available, full stop. A typical match, say 100% of the first 4% of salary, represents an immediate guaranteed 100% return before any market exposure occurs at all. On a $75,000 salary, that can represent $3,000 annually that an employer is contractually prepared to contribute, and that simply goes unclaimed if contributions fall short of the threshold. Research consistently finds that a meaningful share of employees leave substantial matching contributions unclaimed every year. Not from any deliberate choice, but because enrollment paperwork felt like a hassle and got deferred indefinitely. Several $1,000s annually, left uncaptured and compounding for 30 years at typical market returns, represents hundreds of thousands of dollars in foregone wealth over a career, all because a form went unfilled on an inconvenient afternoon. Step 3. Address high-interest debt first. Before any further investment decisions, evaluate outstanding debt honestly. Credit card balances carrying interest in the low 20% range or higher should be eliminated before any additional investing occurs. Paying off debt at that rate is mathematically equivalent to earning a guaranteed risk-free return at that same rate, a return no legitimate investment vehicle can reliably promise. Debt in the moderate range, such as student loans between roughly 5 and 7%, becomes more of a judgment call. Below 5%, prioritizing investment generally makes mathematical sense given typical long-term market returns. Above 7, prioritizing payoff is usually the stronger choice. In the middle range, the better answer is often whichever approach someone will actually maintain consistently. A financial plan abandoned partway through delivers worse results than an imperfect plan followed completely. Step 4. Maximize the Roth IRA. With the foundation secured, the next allocation is a Roth IRA, and this is where meaningful savings genuinely begins compounding into something significant. The 2026 annual contribution limit is $7,500. Contributions are made with after-tax dollars, but every dollar of subsequent growth is entirely tax-free, including at withdrawal in retirement. For someone in a relatively modest tax bracket today, paying a small tax bill now in exchange for decades of completely untaxed growth is a structurally favorable trade, particularly for anyone who expects their income and therefore their tax bracket to rise over time. James allocated $7,500 from his savings into a Roth IRA invested in a broad market index fund. Left untouched from age 30 to 60 at typical historical market returns, that single contribution grows to approximately $130,000, entirely tax-free. The version of James who delayed this decision for a year lost an entire year of compounding that can never be recovered, regardless of what he does afterward. Step 5. Increase 401k contributions beyond the match. Once the match is captured and the Roth is funded, additional retirement savings can flow into the 401k up to its higher annual limit, $24,500 in 2026. Contributions here reduce taxable income in the year they are made. Someone earning $80,000 who contributes $15,000 to their 401k is taxed as though they earned $65,000 that year, producing real immediate tax savings in addition to the long-term growth benefit. Step 6. The account most people overlook. For anyone enrolled in a qualifying high-deductible health insurance plan, the health savings account deserves serious attention. It is arguably the single most tax-advantaged account available in the current tax code, and it is consistently underused. The HSA offers triple tax advantage. Contributions reduce taxable income, growth inside the account is never taxed, and withdrawals for qualified medical expenses are tax-free at any point. The 2026 individual contribution limit is $4,400. The strategy that maximizes its value involves paying current medical expenses out of pocket, investing the HSA contributions in index funds, and preserving receipts because reimbursement has no time limit. Years or decades later, those preserved receipts allow tax-free withdrawals against an account that has been compounding the entire time. Used this way, the HSA functions as a second, even more powerful Roth IRA. Step 7. Keep remaining investments simple. For any money remaining after the steps above, the evidence strongly favors simplicity. Research tracking professional fund managers against simple index benchmarks consistently finds that the overwhelming majority of actively managed funds underperform a basic index fund over extended periods, even with elite credentials, research teams, and significant fees charged for the attempt. A simple, broadly diversified portfolio, domestic and international index funds, a modest bond allocation appropriate to age and risk tolerance, captures the market's long-term return without paying for underperformance. The fee difference alone between an actively managed fund and a low-cost index fund, compounded over 30 years on a meaningful balance, can cost well over $100,000 in fees rather than returns. Every step above matters less than one final factor: the discipline to leave the strategy alone once it is in place. Research tracking actual investor returns versus market returns consistently finds that a meaningful gap, investors underperforming the very funds they are invested in, almost entirely due to poorly timed emotional decisions. Selling during downturns and buying back after recoveries have already occurred is the single most reliable way to convert a sound long-term strategy into a mediocre outcome. Missing just a handful of the market's best days over a multi-decade period can cut total returns by more than half, and those best days cluster with cruel reliability close to the worst days, meaning the investor who panics and exits is almost always absent for the recovery that follows. The solution is automation. Set contributions to move automatically. Choose a sensible allocation. Stop checking it daily. The investors who experience the least damage from their own emotions are consistently the ones who built systems that do not require ongoing willpower to function correctly. 5 years after crossing $50,000, the first person from our opening, still hesitating, still waiting for the market to feel more settled, has a balance that has barely kept pace with inflation. The second person, having executed this sequence once and then automated it, has seen the same $50,000 grow into something closer to double that amount across emergency savings, retirement accounts, and a taxable brokerage account without a single risky bet or special insight. Neither person was smarter. Neither got lucky. One simply acted on a framework while every instinct said to wait, and the other waited for an instinct that was never going to resolve on its own. The first $100,000 is famously the hardest milestone in wealth building, but once it is reached, compounding does most of the remaining work. James is no longer the person who closes the banking app and waits for next weekend. The sequence above is the entire difference. See you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Tell me what you think in the comments, and like and subscribe to James Invest for more content like this.